The new carpet felt wrong. That's what unsettled me. After 12 years, I knew every scuff, every coffee ring shaped like a premonition of corporate downfall. But that morning, it smelled of fresh sealant and organizational amnesia. I stood outside the executive suite, where they'd promised a discussion about expanded opportunities. I'd even worn the power blazer that made me look like I subscribed to a wellness plan, a rookie error. Let me back up. For 12 years, I wasn't the CEO, but I was the core algorithm that kept this tech firm from crashing into a sad little digital graveyard. I'd onboarded every significant tech partner they still boasted about, trained the engineering leads who now had visionary in their bios, re-architected broken systems, debugged screaming client platforms, and once even covered server costs from my own emergency fund when our payment processor glitched. Yet, I never got a proper office, just a spacious workstation near the server racks, and a promise from our founder, Mr. Henderson, back when his voice still had a healthy bandwidth, that one day we'll make it official. Instead, I was utilized, quietly, efficiently, with just enough recognition to keep me thinking the next quarter. Maybe I'd get the title, or at least a parking spot closer to the charging stations. If you're still with me, and this kind of tale is boosting your internal clock cycle, consider hitting subscribe. Trying to hit my first 10K followers, and it would mean more than the stock options I never got. You know how in dystopian thrillers, there's always that one character who says, "I have a bad feeling about this," 5 minutes before the network goes dark? That was me in the smart elevator that morning. New carpet, artisanal cold brew pods in the break room. The front desk AI wouldn't meet my gaze, and the calendar invite, it had a virtual link and a physical room number. Hybrid gaslighting. I remember thinking, better not put confetti in there. I didn't want a celebration. I just wanted acknowledgement, a promotion, heck, even an ergonomic chair. My posture had been perpetually questioning since 2018. The irony? I trained the guy who would end up leading the meeting, fresh out of his coding boot camp. When I took him under my wing, he couldn't differentiate between a phishing scam and a legitimate support ticket. Now, he had bespoke cufflinks and an air of entitled privilege. The little nepotism bot must have enhanced his resume. In those 12 years, I'd watched every internal system failure resolve itself because I was always the one running in, metaphorically speaking, with a high-capacity fire extinguisher. Data breach, I found the vulnerability. Client exodus, I rebuilt the trust. Regulatory fine, I drafted the compliance framework. I never asked for a medal. I just figured someone would notice eventually. But they didn't. Because when people like me keep things running, executives convince themselves they did it all alone. That's the Silicon Valley fairy tale. How guys who crash quarterly reports still get end-of-year bonuses, while I got a branded water bottle that said, "Team Contributor." I remember the last words Mr. Henderson said to me about a month before his final system crash. He'd just finished ranting about some board member trying to liquidate the company's IP. He looked at me and said, "If anything ever happens to me, don't let the clueless win." Back then, I thought he meant fight for the company. Turns out, he meant something else entirely, something encrypted, hidden in a dusty external hard drive I'd forgotten I even had. But that comes later. First, there was the meeting. The smart blinds were drawn, the chairs were too perfectly aligned, and Sarah from HR was already sitting at the table, smiling like she was about to offer me a virtual reality spa package. My gut twisted. I didn't know it yet, but the next 30 minutes would erase 12 years of my life. I walked in expecting a promotion. I walked out holding the documentation that would dismantle their entire operation. The room was too quiet. Sarah had that tight-lipped, fake concerned look they wear when someone's about to be legally decommissioned. The new CEO, Brian, my former mentee, the one who once asked me what an API was, sat there with his hands folded like he was posing for a leadership webinar thumbnail. He smiled, not the kind of smile that says congratulations, but the kind that says, We've already changed your access codes. Please have a seat, Sarah said, like I was at a mindfulness retreat instead of a corporate termination session. I sat ramrod straight in my blazer, didn't blink. Brian leaned forward, practiced concern in every bite of his voice. Lyra, first, I just want to say how much we appreciate everything you've done. You've truly been instrumental in shaping this company. We all recognize that. The platitude was so loud, it didn't need to be spoken. Still, he spoke it. But we're entering a new chapter, a more agile phase, and after careful review with the board, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate certain roles. Unfortunately, yours is one of them. My role, the role that created every other crucial function. One that had no formal title because I filled the gaps nobody else even saw. Eliminate? I asked, or replace? Sarah jumped in, opening a digital folder like she was unveiling a new tablet. We've prepared a severance package that includes 6 weeks' pay, continuation of benefits through the end of the month, and a general release of claims. Her voice was smooth and empty, like she was reading a software license agreement. No warning, no performance issue, no nothing. Just done. 12 years reduced to a data packet, sealed with my legal silence. Brian kept talking. It's a restructure, really. We need to stay lean, nimble, focused on innovation. I wanted to laugh. Innovation? Half their current systems still ran on legacy code and my uncredited patches. If I stopped patching holes, the entire platform would have crashed by Q2 last year. I didn't say any of that. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't ask why me, because I already knew the answer. I was too experienced, too committed, too un-influencer. No TED Talks, no flashy LinkedIn posts. I just worked. And when people like me stop being useful, we become a liability to the insecure executives who inherited power instead of earning it. I looked at the papers, scanned every line. General release, arbitration clause, non-disparagement agreement, all the usual corporate muzzle tactics. They wanted to delete me, clean, like I'd never existed. You're taking this very well, Sarah said gently, probably relieved I wasn't throwing a monitor. I closed the digital folder. I'd like a copy. Oh, of course, she said, sliding a USB drive across the table like it was a dessert menu. I stood up, smoothed my skirt. My heart was thrumming so loud I couldn't hear the hum of the servers anymore, but I didn't let it show. I gave Brian one last look, not angry, just analytical. Thank you, I said, slipping the drive into my bag. I'll take this to my counsel. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just come from the office, still wearing a blouse stained with toner and the expression of someone who just had to explain to a VP why you can't expense a virtual reality arcade outing. My phone buzzed as I was pulling into my driveway. Private number. Almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. His voice was weaker than usual. Come to the house, Mr. Henderson said. Tonight. Just you. No small talk, no pleasantries, just a strained voice full of urgency and maybe something darker. When I arrived, his house looked untouched, same overgrown succulents, same cracked solar lights. But inside, he looked like a half-rendered ghost, lost 20 pounds at least, eyes sunken, wrapped in an old university hoodie, wheezing like every breath was a system error. He didn't ask me to sit, just handed me a glass of whiskey and a manila envelope, yellowed at the corners, sealed with tape that looked like it had survived a network apocalypse. I'm not offline, he rasped, yet. But the data miners are already circling. You've seen Brian. I nodded, careful. The board had been getting louder lately, pushing for full automation, talking about mass layoffs, whispering about taking the company public just to cash out. It had been getting ugly in the dark corners of their virtual meetings. I trust you, he said. Hell, I need you. When they get their claws in, I want someone on the inside who actually gives a damn, not just about profit margins, but about people. He pushed the envelope toward me like it was a ticking time bomb. Inside, legal documents, dry, sterile, but powerful. An amendment to his living trust and company charter, drafted during his last hospital visit. A small but meaningful ownership transfer, 8%. Enough to get noticed, enough to interfere. I blinked. This is for me? Don't act so surprised. You've been running the place since 2013, even if no one's bothered to give you a damn title. This is insurance. If they try to gut it, you have teeth. Use them when the time comes. I didn't know what to say. Gratitude wasn't the right word. It felt like being handed the launch codes after years of sweeping the floors at the Pentagon. He smiled, a little sadly. You don't have to tell anyone. In fact, don't. Just keep it safe. If they treat you right, burn it. If they don't, he coughed hard. Well, you'll know. I hugged him. First time I ever had, last time I ever would. He died 8 months later. Massive system failure in the boardroom. The executives shed crocodile tears and then immediately started segmenting the company into pieces like it was a leftover pizza. But I kept my head down, didn't mention the papers, didn't want power. I just wanted to do good work. So I locked the envelope in a fireproof vault in my home office. Didn't look at it again for years. Life moved fast. New hires, lost clients, budget battles, bad coffee. I told myself I didn't need it. Told myself they'd come around eventually. Until that digital folder slid across the screen from Sarah last week. That night, I sat on the floor of my home office in sweatpants and fury, digging through old tax returns and performance reviews like a woman possessed. Finally, under a stack of onboarding documents and one unopened Christmas e-card from accounting, I found it. Same dusty external drive, same initials in black digital ink, still encrypted. My hands shook as I unlocked it. Ownership transfer, trust amendment, founder's original digital signature, notarized. My name, my leverage. And suddenly, what used to feel like a relic from a dead man looked a whole lot more like a loaded weapon. The next morning, I called Naomi. We met in college. She studied law. I studied getting people out of digital disasters without anyone noticing. She once got a tenured professor fired for plagiarizing his own syllabus, sharp, brutal, and allergic to pretense. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me it's not another broken NDA scandal. Worse, I said. I just got fired from my own damn company. She didn't even pretend to be shocked. Took them long enough. By noon, we were sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by 3 virtual data rooms, a half-dead laptop, and a crime scene of sticky notes. I poured us both black coffee. She brought donuts that tasted like revenge. Let's find the vulnerabilities, she said, cracking her knuckles. See which ones are big enough to crawl through. We started with Mr. Henderson's documents. Everything was airtight, ownership percentage, digital witness signatures, a full notarized amendment to the operating agreement that acknowledged me as a minority stakeholder and assigned managerial privileges in perpetuity or until voluntary forfeiture. That last clause was gold. But Naomi kept digging. Let's check public records, see if they ever filed the updates after his death. I pulled up the state business registry. Took us 20 minutes to find the right LLC filing, and then she froze, her finger hovering over the screen. Oh my God, they did file it. There it was, clear as daylight, a scanned page from 10 years ago with 2 names listed under managing members. 1, Mr. Henderson, deceased. 2, Lyra Bell, my full legal name. Not just as a stakeholder, but as a managing member. One of 2. Naomi sat back, stunned. Realize what this means? I nodded, the air around me suddenly colder. They don't own the company, not entirely, not without your consent. They don't, she said, eyes narrowing. And unless there's a formal removal, which I'm willing to bet they never even considered, you're still legally one half of this operation. And that was when the corporate gaslighting began. The same day Naomi sent out her first letter of inquiry to the company's legal team, LinkedIn suddenly got real loud. A vague staff restructuring post from Brian, one of the execs I mentored, liked it with a clapping emoji. Then a newsletter went out to clients claiming I had stepped away to pursue new opportunities in bold italics. They scrubbed my name off the website, deleted the internal knowledge base I built. One junior employee DM'd me in a panic, saying they were told not to mention me at meetings. I laughed, sharp and joyless. "They're trying to erase you," she said, "and if they succeed in rewriting the story, they'll try to bury the facts behind it." Not happening. So, we started collecting. I downloaded every email thread, every Slack message, every PDF I had ever signed, written, or reviewed. We compared timestamps, checked board meeting minutes, even pulled archived screenshots from the company's old employee portal. I kept everything. They wanted to play dirty. I built the mud they were now drowning in. Meanwhile, Naomi fired off a formal cease and desist to freeze any legal maneuvering and demanded confirmation of my ownership rights, citing the founder's amendment and the LLC records. She also requested immediate access to the current cap table, financial disclosures, and voting records. The silence that followed was almost cinematic until an auto-reply came back from their general counsel. "We're currently reviewing the documents in question. Please allow 3 to 5 business days for response." Translation: panic in progress. They thought I'd vanish quietly. They thought they could rewrite the ending, but I wasn't just part of the company's history. Legally, I was the company. The bank teller looked like he just swallowed a microchip. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I think I need to get my manager." "You do," I said calmly, sliding the digital folder across the counter. Inside, the certified LLC filing listing me as managing member, the founder's notarized amendment, and a letter from Naomi invoking my right to restrict corporate fund movement due to an unresolved ownership dispute. I even had a little digital sticky note on the first page that read, "Yes, this is real. No, this isn't a drill." 10 minutes later, we were in the branch manager's glass office. She wore a nameplate that said Linda, a look that said, "I did not wake up today for this." I let her read in silence. Then I watched the flicker of corporate dread cross her face when she hit the words, "Authorized account freeze." "I'll have to escalate this," Linda said finally. "Good," I said, sipping my lukewarm coffee. "Please do." I left the bank 30 minutes later, knowing 2 things. The company's main operating account was frozen until the ownership dispute was resolved in court or settled voluntarily. Brian was about to have the worst Monday of his life. Back at home, I opened a private cloud sheet labeled Contracts, Personal Leverage. These were clients I had brought in, not team wins, not collaborative outreach. These were the whales I'd landed personally, after years of virtual meetings, data analysis, and fixing disasters their previous vendors had caused. Most of their contracts had fine print clauses that named me specifically as point of contact, performance and continuity clauses tied directly to my involvement. Not a coincidence. I'd written most of them myself. So I started making calls. I didn't scream, didn't rant, just calmly told them I was no longer with the company, that there was an ownership dispute in progress, and that any changes to their contracts, especially service continuity, should be reviewed by their legal counsel. I said the word liability enough times to raise blood pressure. Some gasped, some cursed. One client, head of a medical software firm in Dallas, paused and said, "Wait, you're not there? Then who the hell is running the rollout?" I just smiled into the phone. "You tell me." Within 24 hours, Brian put out a boilerplate. "Everything is fine email, corporate speak for please don't look behind the firewall." Said they were navigating a transition and excited for the next chapter. It was all buzzwords and fluff. But behind the scenes, I knew he was spiraling. My inbox started filling with passive-aggressive requests from internal teams pretending like I'd left voluntarily. Hey, any chance you can forward the Q3 invoice template? Do you remember which folder the license keys are in? We seem to be having trouble locating the onboarding docs you built. I replied to none. They'd taken my job. Now they could have my silence too. Naomi sent a follow-up letter to the board that day. Included the full list of accounts frozen, contracts jeopardized, and damages potentially accruing every hour they pretended this wasn't real. She ended it with one sentence. My client remains open to resolution, provided it begins with truth. And from the looks of the panic-flavored email drip coming from their interns and underpaid project managers, the truth was already causing significant system instability. The house of cards hadn't collapsed yet, but I'd just pulled the keystone. I gave them a week, a full 7 business days to do the right thing. They didn't. Instead, they doubled down, sent out a press release implying I'd transitioned into retirement. Retirement? I was 47, not 87. I didn't code in COBOL. I didn't garden. I certainly didn't gracefully bow out while some prepubescent MBA tried to Frankenstein my legacy into a tech pitch. So, I stopped being quiet. It started with one email. I sent it to the board. Subject line: Correction to internal miscommunication regarding my departure. Inside was a 3-paragraph summary of what had occurred. Professional tone, no expletives, no fire, just facts. Then I attached the founding documents, the LLC records listing me as managing member, the signed amendment from the founder, and a helpful PDF outlining the procedural violations committed during my termination. I bolded the part where they removed a managing member without formal vote or due process. I finished with, "This is not a negotiation. This is a legal correction. You have 72 hours to acknowledge my status and restore my access, or I proceed with litigation, beginning with breach of fiduciary duty and misrepresentation." And just to sweeten the pot, I attached a cherry on top. An internal memo from 6 months prior I had quietly BCC'd to my personal email. The memo showed Brian and Sarah discussing strategic staff downsizing with my name listed under high-cost legacy staff, and a note that read, "Keep quiet until ready to execute. Avoid pre-alert to minimize legal exposure." They hadn't just fired me. They had planned to ambush me, and I had the receipts. Within 12 hours, the board's general counsel replied with a 2-sentence acknowledgement. No apology, just legal hedging. But the next wave wasn't legal. It was reputational. Because by Thursday, 3 clients had pulled out. Not because I told them to, but because they could smell the rot. One called it a stability concern. Another cited loss of institutional knowledge. The biggest one, a 7-figure contract out of Chicago, sent a blunt message. Our decision to work with your firm was tied to specific individuals. Those individuals are no longer present. Translation: She was the reason we trusted you. She's gone, so are we. Naomi and I began preparing the lawsuit. Breach of contract, wrongful termination under misrepresented authority, fraudulent misrepresentation to clients. She was practically humming. Meanwhile, I began leaking just enough to set fire to the fiction they'd been spreading. A quiet message to a journalist friend with access to a few industry newsletters, a redacted screenshot of the memo showing the targeted downsizing, the clause from one of the contracts showing me as a named party, a casual but damning comment in a private LinkedIn group. Interesting how someone can retire without prior notice or formal process and still hold managing authority. It didn't take long. By Friday, their VP of sales had updated his LinkedIn to seeking new opportunities. Their head of operations went radio silent, and the board, they started calling Naomi directly instead of replying by email. I could hear the storm brewing in their voicemails, desperation disguised as diplomacy. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was efficient. They forgot something simple. I wasn't just an employee. I built the damn kingdom. And now I had the receipts, the titles, the power to burn it to ash if I chose to. The courier delivered the final letter on Monday morning, hand-delivered, notarized, and time-stamped. It was addressed to Brian, the board, and corporate counsel. Naomi had worded it with surgical precision. As managing member per LLC registration, and as per the founder's documented amendment, my client is invoking her rights under Section 6.1b of the operating agreement. Effective immediately, all executive actions are subject to joint approval. Continued operation without acknowledgement of her authority constitutes willful breach. Remedy deadline, 72 hours. Translation: I'm done playing nice. Either sit down or get taken down. They didn't respond for 16 hours. Then the panic started. A board member emailed Naomi a shaky offer. We're open to discussing an advisory position with retroactive compensation. No. Another tried the flattery route. Your institutional knowledge is invaluable. Cute, but no. Then came Brian himself, requesting a confidential call to talk options. Options? Naomi replied with a sentence that practically froze the room through email. My client is not interested in patchwork apologies. She will accept full reinstatement, formal board resignation from current leadership, immediate control, or she files for dissolution under Section 8.3. They thought she was bluffing. Until the bank reconfirmed the freeze. Until clients demanded to know who was actually running the ship. Until word got out that a managing member had been illegally removed without a vote, and investors started whispering fiduciary liability. So we scheduled the meeting. Not a Zoom, not a call. In person. Thursday, 10 a.m. Conference room A. Same one where they fired me. This time, I didn't walk in alone. Naomi walked beside me, in her black suit, binder in hand like a war drum. I wore the same blazer they fired me in. It still fit. Funny how some things don't shrink under pressure. The room was full. Brian, board members, 2 lawyers with overpriced watches, and Sarah from HR, who had given me that brittle little smile 3 weeks ago. She didn't look so smug this time. I sat down, calm and deadly quiet. Naomi laid out the documents. This is not a negotiation. You have 2 paths. 1, you acknowledge my client's authority, relinquish your seats, and cooperate with transition. 2, we move to dissolve the company under Clause 8.3, and we all get very acquainted with litigation, asset recovery, and shareholder lawsuits. Silence. Then Brian opened his mouth, something halfway between indignation and a tremble. She wasn't authorized to. She is now, Naomi interrupted. And she always was. You just didn't bother to check the paperwork. The rest was slow, painful. Some muttered objections, some desperate legal jargon, but it ended exactly as it needed to, with them signing resignation letters one by one. Naomi handed me a printed document labeled Managing Member Acknowledged Authority and Sole Control. I signed it with a pen I'd been carrying in my purse for 12 years, but as an employee, as an owner. I stood, took one long look around the room. The furniture was different, the blinds were half closed, but I remembered every decision made here, every mess I'd cleaned up, every empty promise I'd swallowed. Gentlemen, I said quietly, you're dismissed. And then I turned around, heels clicking like gunfire on polished tile, and walked out. This time, not as the ghost in their machine, but as the one who now held the plug. The official form was called Certificate of Dissolution, Voluntary. It sounded polite, almost harmless. Just a few pages, a few checkboxes, a signature, a notary, like signing up for a streaming service or canceling your gym membership. But in my hands, it was an execution order. Clause 8.3 of the Charter was clear. In the event of unresolved dispute between managing members that materially threatens the viability of operations, either member may file for immediate dissolution of the entity, subject to state compliance. They didn't read the fine print. I did. I always did. Naomi filed the paperwork on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. I stood behind her, watching her upload the forms, email the Secretary of State, and confirm the digital receipt to our shared drive. It didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel cinematic. It felt surgical. The next morning, the bank accounts were closed. Your direct deposits bounced. Vendor accounts froze mid-transaction. The main site went down for scheduled maintenance, which we both knew was code for your world just stopped spinning. They scrambled, of course, called the state, called their lawyers, tried to bluff their way through it, but the answer came back the same. The dissolution was lawful, uncontested, permanent. By Friday, their office was a ghost town. I drove past it once, just once, because closure is a funny thing. The parking lot was empty. One of the interns had left a small succulent on the windowsill. It was still there, drooping toward death in the mid-morning sun. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Naomi had already delivered the final notification. The lease was terminated. Assets were to be liquidated, and remaining stakeholders would be notified regarding distributions, such as they were. Turns out, when your company is built on lies, there's not much value left once you strip away the illusion. They tried to call me, every last one of them. Some begged, some threatened, some sent emails with subject lines like, "Let's talk." And this doesn't have to end like this, but it did, and it had. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even gloating. I didn't want their titles. I didn't need the money. I didn't need an apology or a plaque or a farewell party with store-bought cupcakes and a speech about her many contributions. I needed truth, and the truth was, I had given them every chance. When they fired me, they thought I'd go quietly. When they erased me, they thought the world would believe them. When they realized I held the key, they thought I wouldn't use it. They were wrong on all counts. I didn't want to burn it all down, but sometimes the only way to fix a rotting house is to lock the doors and strike the match. And so I did. They said I was replaceable. Funny, I turned out to be irreplaceable by law. The lesson here is profound. Know your worth, understand your contributions, and always, always keep impeccable records. Even when you feel undervalued, the true impact you make is often far greater than what's formally recognized. Don't let others define your narrative or diminish your legacy. When faced with injustice, empower yourself with knowledge and seek the right allies. Your integrity and diligent work are assets that no one can truly take away, and sometimes the most silent individuals hold the loudest power. Believe in your ability to navigate challenges and emerge stronger, for resilience is your greatest leverage.